is the 1st of February. No one gives enough credit to February. I feel like February is like, it's the year's way of giving you like 28 extra days to start those goals that you set yourself at the beginning of the year. We are planning on going up to the shopping centre in like maybe an hour, maybe half an hour. Whenever I'm done filming this clip, and while I'm up there, I'm going to try and find a book by E.M. Forster. I was researching a video that I'm planning on getting up this month, that I won't say too much about, but it's an exciting video. It's something different for me and I'm really looking forward to getting around to finishing it. The planning part is taking so long though, because it's a big video, despite being just like a little fun thing, but it's taken a lot of research, and part of that research I was looking into E.M. Forster's philosophy. There's a little hint for what this video is going to be. So I was looking into E.M. Forster last night, and I knew he was part of the Bloomsbury group, which means that his writing was probably going to be quite similar to Virginia Woolf, modernist, that kind of thing. And I know obviously the classic author, but he's like one of the big classic authors, like the big names in classic authors literature, I think. At least I hear him a lot, and I hear a lot of people, you know, referencing Howard's End and Maurice and stuff, but I had no idea what the specifics of E.M. Forster's philosophy was, and now that I know, I'm so looking forward to reading an E.M. Forster book. I have one in mind that I put into my notes last night while I was researching this video, because again, I knew we were going out today and I knew that I really wanted to read this book so soon, and so I put it in my notes what it was. I hate using the Notion app because it's so like sensitive. Anyway, The Longest Journey is the book that I'm going to try and look for when we go up to Waterstones today, but I have a feeling that's not going to be the one that they have. So if they have any other E.M. Forster book, I will happily take it, because again, I'm just really like, I really want to read one of his books now that I know what I know, but ideally it would be that one. So like most 20th century authors, E.M. Forster's philosophy was very centred around the individual, the uniqueness of the individual. What was it that I wrote down? I'm just going to use my notes for this. He was focused on the uniqueness of the individual, believed in a moderate skepticism as being healthy, and for people to achieve a satisfactory life they must connect with nature but also not isolate themselves from their current modern time. I think what he said about it was that it would exaggerate and undermine an individual's sense of reality if you were to solely connect with one over the other, which again, I just love that. I love that philosophy, and apparently that is quite evident in The Longest Journey. So I'm really hoping to find that one when we go up to Waterstones. But again, apparently that's quite a consistent theme throughout all of his books, so I'll take whichever one, but because that one was specifically referenced, that's the one I'm going to aim to get. But speaking about reading, I have a couple of books that I will also be trying to get through. So we have To The Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. This is a reread, and then we have this non-fiction book on Scotland, A History from the Earliest Times by Alistair Moffat. These are two books that I'm going to be planning on reading. Hopefully finish this one maybe by next week, and then this one's a trip. We'll go through this one first. So To The Lighthouse. Obviously I have read To The Lighthouse before. I got a tattoo on my arm of a lighthouse after finishing this book back in 2021. I think it was like 3 months after I finished it, because I knew there was something in this that just really connected with me, but I just didn't know what specifically, because I hadn't really done an extensive note-taking or annotation of this book, because I was planning on letting Stefan borrow it, and he did, and he read it, and he loved it as well. So To The Lighthouse, 50 pages in, loving it so far, grasping a lot that I didn't originally, but kind of like felt. And I'm getting a lot more on top of that from reading her early work, and also from just how far life has changed, how life has come since 2021 for me. Like I've learned a lot, I've experienced a lot. I think I'm in a lot more of a level with this book now that I have given a couple more years and come back to it. So loving this, obviously. I want to say this is my favourite, and I think it is my favourite I think it will forever be my favourite, but I'm also reading Orlando right now, and that is like the best work I have ever read in my entire life so far. But this is definitely coming in close. So, To The Lighthouse. What my plan is to maybe try and shove in like 50 pages a day, and I'd be able to finish this in 4 days. So maybe I'd get it done by next week, and that would be ideal. But then the other book that I showed you was this massive non-fiction on Scotland. So this book literally begins at the very, very beginning, like when the land masses joined together to create Scotland. So it goes quite far back, and it goes from that point all the way until I think like the referendum, which I think was 2014, maybe 2016. I am not a big non-fiction reader. I think I've read maybe like 4 non-fictions in my entire life. So why did I choose to pick up the chunkiest non-fiction that Waterstones had? I'm reading this for my project that I keep talking about and not actually talking about. I keep referencing but not actually going into detail about. It's my novel that I'm writing. I'm basing it on this book essentially. So that's why I'm reading this. Not for fun, but instead for proper research. I feel like since finishing university, I've really wanted to I really want to study. Like university, I feel like just kind of sucks that desire out of you because everything's on like a deadline and there's so much stress involved. But like when you've got the freedom and the space to do it yourself, I, for one, am finding so much more motivation to do it, which is why I've managed to get 30 pages into this behemoth of a novel. Not a novel, of a book. See, that's how much of a non-fiction reader I am. Those 2 books I plan on reading throughout this video, and I will make reference to in this video. We'll see how much progress I can make whilst we're going through however long this video lasts. So I'm going to go and get us all ready to go to the shopping centre now because Clem is getting fussy, which means it's time to leave. And so I'm going to go and see if I can find that Ian Forster book up at Waterstones. We'll probably get a coffee, we'll see if we can get some writing done, maybe some reading done while Clem naps in her pram. We'll see what happens, we'll see how it goes, and I will update you soon, hopefully. So the Waterstones trip happened as planned, and I got an A.M. Forster book and I also got another book. When I went, there was only 2 A.M. Forster books there. There was A Room with a View and then the one I got, and A Room with a View sounded very intriguing. I was definitely kind of torn between the 2, but I feel like this is a one that I am more interested in, so I got A Passage to India. You can't see it. A Passage to India. This is about 2 women who go to a trip to India, and then they are shown around some caves, I'm pretty sure, and they run into a doctor, and when the doctor comes out of the cave, he finds himself in the centre of a scandal, is what the back says. So I am so intrigued. I know Ian Forster is also known for his wit, so I'm really looking forward to this. One thing I want to do though is I kind of want to read this alongside A Voyage Out by Virginia Woolf, because for some reason I feel like they would in some ways connect with one another. I feel like they would have similar kind of inspiration or something like that, just a similar kind of premise. Again, because Ian Forster and Virginia Woolf were part of the same group, they were part of the Bloomsbury group, and also the whole idea of this book, I'm not too sure much about The Voyage Out. I'm pretty sure The Voyage Out is about a woman coming back from a trip abroad. So I think what I might do is wait until I am reading A Voyage Out to read this alongside it, but because I'm rereading To The Lighthouse right now, and after I finish To The Lighthouse I need to finish reading Orlando. The Voyage Out is after Orlando in my little schedule that I've made for trying to tackle all of Virginia Woolf's novels. So I would have to wait till after I read Orlando. And my only thing is that I'm really curious and intrigued by Ian Forster, and I really want to read one of his books. But I do think I'm going to benefit more from it by waiting. So I got a passage to India kind of prematurely, but I'm looking forward to picking this up once I get to a voyage out. The other book I picked up was Mercury Pictures Presents by Anthony Marra. It's just going to be something quick and easy for me to fly through in between all these classics I'm planning on getting to this year. But those are the two books that I bought from Waterstones. But other than that Waterstones trip, I feel like I've done loads, but I haven't really done much in terms of productivity for the vlog, like anything reading or writing based. What I have done is I've read like another paragraph of To The Lighthouse. I am really like, there's so much in this book that I did not pick up on when I first read it, which I think is the case with most books that I don't annotate. Like, I know that there's something that I'm intrigued into looking more into, but I never actually know what it is, and then when I actually take my time to go through and annotate it, I always find just so much. And I think I'm going to sit on the floor so I can put my camera down. That feels a lot better. To The Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. I read this back in 2021. I feel like I've already mentioned that, but I knew that there was something. It was my favourite book from when I read it. I knew that. I don't have any doubts about that now that I'm rereading it. I know that it's definitely like one of my favourite books I've ever read, if not my favourite book I've ever read. I'm going to admit it's better than Frankenstein. It's probably taken over my love for Frankenstein because it's that just amazing. I can't put into words how I feel about any Virginia Woolf book. To The Lighthouse. To The Lighthouse is about a family who takes a trip to Scotland and stays at this house, and then from the house they can see a lighthouse in the distance, and they're making this plan to go to the lighthouse because the youngest son is asking, but will they ever make it to that lighthouse? Well, you have to read to find out. But so again, very, very dull plot. Like, that is literally the plot, is just about family on their holiday doing normal day-to-day things. Somebody is trying to get married, or they're working up to a proposal. The mum is looking at her children, wondering what they're going to do with their lives, where they're going to go. The dad is a philosopher, and he is in the middle of like an identity crisis in a way, where he's like wondering, he's kind of getting trapped in that thought of like, well, he's never going to be good enough. There's always going to be someone better. And so how does he kind of overcome that? There's just a lot going on more internally with these characters than there is externally. Externally, they're just having a holiday. Everyone's getting on with their life. There's a painter there, Lily Briscoe, who is my favourite character ever written, is Lily Briscoe, and she is like witnessing this family and their holiday, and she's trying to capture that in a painting, which is, she's finding it difficult because of something that she can't work out. Again, not a very exciting plot, but what is going on underneath the plot, underneath what's happening outside, is just this, everyone's in turmoil. They're kind of going through like a state of trying to re-find or hold on to their place in the world and their lives and their identity. Kind of pinning that on to Mr. Ramsay, which I think is one of the most interesting characters I have read in a Virginia Woolf book. I think Virginia Woolf writes men really well, which, I mean, it's a weird thing to say, but she does. She writes women really well as well, but like, I think it's really surprising how well she can write men, and Mr. Ramsay is a perfect example of that. He is the dad of like, I think, was it 6? I think he's got like 6 kids. So he's a dad, and on this holiday he's brought one of his best friends, William Banks. He's obviously, there's Lily Briscoe there, who's the painter, and there's a couple of other people who work there, people that Mrs. Ramsay just kind of asks to come because she has a whole other story and a half, which we'll get into. But he also has Charles Tansley there, and Charles Tansley is his little follower. He's his disciple, because Mr. Ramsay is a philosopher, and I'm pretty sure he teaches philosophy at university. So yeah, Mr. Ramsay has Charles Tansley there, and Charles Tansley is his disciple. Charles Tansley he worships Mr. Ramsay. He is also another really interesting character. I think, again, one of Virginia Woolf's best written characters that I have read so far, because he exposes so much about the family, Mr. Ramsay, the idea of just completely being consumed by philosophy and study and not really having an outside glance on things, kind of just keeping everything so internal, but on a wide scale internal, where you're looking at everyone's like the perspective of everyone, the perspective of the world, the philosophical state of the world. But yeah, he exposes so much of that because he himself is a very, I don't want to be rude about a fictional character, but he is a very weak and weak-minded person, which is why he's kind of following Mr. Ramsay so heavily, because Mr. Ramsay comes across as a very confident, very defined, established man. He is someone who is respected, he is someone who is looked up to, and he's also someone who has a lot of academic influence, it appears, in the philosophical realm of academia. But Mr. Ramsay's problem, as I have mentioned briefly, is that he, despite having all of these followers, despite having people who worship him like Mr. Tamsley does, despite having so much respect and having so many achievements, he is constantly just in a cycle of trying to strive for the next thing. And then he does actually have this really interesting section, this thing's like 3 pages long, of him working out like this lineage of like how to get to the next stage, because someone else is going to get one step ahead of him, and how does he get one step ahead of him? Is it not good enough that he's already got so far, and that, you know, he's gotten further than other people, but, you know, there's always that next step. He's always obsessed with like the next step and not being good enough, and always having something else to achieve, something else that needs done, which I think it drives him mad. I feel like I could go on for like decades talking about this book, because there is so much in it, and I say that about, like, I think of the 3 Virginia Woolf books I've read, this one included. There's just, she is fascinating to me, how intelligent she is, and yet so underappreciated in her life for being so intelligent, because her books were not popular as they were being published, which is a shame, because they're so good, and I'm obsessed. I am so glad that I decided just to go ahead and actually read Mrs. Dalloway properly, and like just get into it and study it, because I have discovered my new love. So that is To The Lighthouse. I will probably have a lot more to say about this as I finish reading it. I plan on finishing it this week, because it's a very short book. There's a lot in it, but it's very short, and I would like to start reading Orlando again, because I'm doing this Virginia Woolf jigsaw, and I'm seeing a lot of Orlando references, and I'm like remembering The Great Frost, and I need to get back on that. So I'm probably going to try and finish this week so I can get back on Orlando. So that's really everything that I had to say for this update. That was a really long Virginia Woolf ramble that I did not expect to go on, but again, she's just so fantastic. Underrated. So underrated. If you're worried about going into Virginia Woolf because you've heard that she is pretentious, that she is annoying, or that she has, or you're worried about the plots, if you like to absolutely tear books apart with like analysing and annotating and stuff like that, I would definitely go ahead with Virginia Woolf. You will not be bored if you like to really read into novels. I won't tell you what day it is, because that would be revealing far too much as to how long it has taken me to get to this point. But we'll say it's been a while since I started this vlog. 100 pages into To The Lighthouse. This is my first time annotating it, as I have already mentioned, and if you can see, I have been very invested in what's going down in this book. And now that I'm going through it with the intent of annotating, I am having a time. There's too much for me to talk about, I feel like. What I wanted to do was kind of have like a full video dedicated to this. Again, it would be like my dissertation video, but also I wanted to like do something else as well, because my dissertation video would be specifically talking about similarities between this book and Jung's philosophy on the individual and like individuation and personal development, both of which are very similar, and there's like so much there's so much in Virginia Woolf that kind of links to that, and really just 20th century literature as a whole kind of links to that, but there's more than that, I feel like, in this book. This is a story of a family. I've already been through this. It's a story of a family who go on holiday and they invite like a whole crowd of people with them, and each person has their own acts as like a little microscope into a type of person. So we have a painter and a poet and a critic and a philosopher, an apprentice, and a philosopher's apprentice, another philosopher, and a mother. And then we have like a whole group of youth as well, which is the Ramses children. I have annotated this book so much. It's coming so close to like how much Night and Day was annotated. I think I say this every time I'm reading a Virginia Woolf book to everybody who will listen to me, which is becoming a very few amount of people at this point because I am a broken record. There is just so much to get from Virginia Woolf. There's so much to get from modernism as a whole. If you're picking up any modernist book, like really, like, and you like to annotate, you like to analyse, you like to break down books, really go through those books with like fine-tooth combs and just pick out everything, because every word, there's not a single line in here that's an accident, you know, everything has a point. And if something feels out of place, look into that the hardest because that is usually the most crucial piece to the book as a whole. When I first read this, one thing that I really like honed in on was the relationship between Lily Briscoe and Mrs. Ramsay, and it's something else that I'm really curious about here as well, because I do think that the whole concept of family and having a family is becoming quite a controversial topic in itself, where whether or not you should have a family or whether or not you're wasting your time if you are someone with a great mind like Mr. Ramsay, who is a philosopher, or, you know, Lily Briscoe, who's a painter. Like, does she even want to get married? Does she even want to have a family? Like, those are very key questions that are brought up through this book. We got to this point at the dinner table where Lily Briscoe is looking over at Mrs. Ramsay, and there's moments where, at least from Lily Briscoe's perspective, that Mrs. Ramsay is being quite manipulative. She's manipulating the situation a lot in order to appease everyone. So everyone's on like this, like they're feeling at ease. They're feeling a connection that is probably not there with each other. And the way she's doing that is kind of forcing everyone into like a societal role that is very much based on men and women. So that is something I didn't pick up on very quickly in my first read, and now that I am picking up on that, I'm starting to see that Mrs. Ramsay again plays like this major role in the novel. In fact, it would probably be easy to argue that she is the main character, she is the main focal point, because she has this strong influence on everyone. It's so interesting. I do think it's still something that I do need to sit with longer in order to properly form like an actual conclusion from it, but what I'm getting so far is that Mrs. Ramsay has this very strong perception and idea of what a household looks like and what a family looks like and how you should act in like a society or like a small community such as the Ramsays, because we don't just have their family, it's everyone else that they've invited, like Minta Doyle and Augustus Carmichael, William Banks, and obviously you have Lily Briscoe and Paul Rayleigh and Charles Tansley, and then the house staff as well. So you have so many people that are around this holiday, that are based in this holiday or on this holiday, and it's Mrs. Ramsay's idea on how they should act with each other. And there's a lot to say about the structure as well. There's a whole section in this book that is written inside a bracket. It's like modernism at its peak, I would say, because the punctuation is everywhere. There's just so much structurally that's interesting about this. But so far, the window, which is the first part of the novel, is about everybody. It's not just about the Ramsays, it's not just about Mrs. Ramsay, although it is all very centred on Mrs. Ramsay. It is about everyone and their perception and where their place is. I think that it's saying a lot about society's changing attitudes on a lot of tradition. I'm pretty sure Virginia Woolf was a Victorian baby, so I think a lot of her work is centred around this like changing attitude that's happening in the early 20th century around the modernist movement. People's attitudes are changing towards traditions like having families and the men and woman thing. The past is losing its place among the present. The youth have all of these wild ideas. They cannot be tamed. And I think that a lot of that is represented here. But the book is about to like take a huge escalation. I still think it's my favourite Virginia Woolf book. I haven't finished it yet. I haven't finished my reread. I haven't finished all of Virginia Woolf's books, but I do think this one is definitely still my favourite. I think it says the most. I think it does the most. And I'm just really intrigued to go through these last two sections. Whilst annotating and whilst having a lot more context on Virginia Woolf, on Virginia Woolf's other works, on the modernist movement, on the 20th century, because it's like a treasure trove of ideas and philosophies and just everything. I'm so excited. So I'm going to now go and get dinner. I'm going to put Clem in the bath, and then I think I'm going to try and finish this first section and see if we can finish the last two sections over the next couple days by the end of the week. So I will see you when I've finished the window, or perhaps when I've just finished the book. We'll see. I've finally finished To The Lighthouse. We will not talk about how long it has taken me to finish this or how long it's taken me to sit down and film this clip. But so obviously it is very clear this is one of my favourite books that I've ever read. Virginia Woolf is one of my favourite authors that I've ever discovered, and this time from rereading this book those opinions have only been solidified. I still stand by this being one of the greatest books that I've ever read, and it is still honestly perhaps even just my favourite so far that I've ever read. Most importantly, I feel like this is a great indicator of how people's minds and attitudes and traditions and the whole the society as a whole was changing, in particular the intellectual society, so the artists and the philosophers and the critics and stuff like that, how their opinions on tradition was altering or becoming a little bit more prominent for the time. And what I mean by that is there is such an in-depth conversation being had through the way these characters kind of connect with one another and how these characters act with one another, about family and traditional family roles, and whether or not having a family is a necessity in life, especially for the intellectuals or the great minds. In particular, that conversation is really had out between William Banks and Mr. Ramsay. William Banks is Mr. Ramsay's oldest friend, and he kind of saw Mr. Ramsay go from this great independent man to a family man with 8 children. But that conversation is also had out with Lily Briscoe, who is one of my favourite characters in this, because she is the artist and the painter, and she never marries, but Mrs. Ramsay has this opinion that everyone should marry, especially her, and she should marry William Banks, who is a widower and has an interest in Lily Briscoe but has no interest in the traditional family life. It's just such a really interesting discussion, especially with the context of the modernist era and the 20th century, and the idea of coming from such an intensely traditional society into something a bit more looser, and having people's attitudes towards what tradition really is change so drastically. I feel like this book really documents that really well, and that is one of the main reasons that drew me in at first with reading this novel, because I kind of got senses of it but I couldn't really pinpoint what it was exactly that Virginia Woolf was trying to state, and so from reading it the second time I've gained a clearer opinion and understanding of what it was she was trying to say, and also from reading her other works. I know that she talks about writing this book in her essay Professions for Women, where she talks about the angel in the house, which is Mrs. Ramsay, and her position in this novel and her position really in society, Mrs. Ramsay being based on her own mum. And it is a really interesting essay, and it is a really interesting take on the role of the angel in the house, which, if you don't know, the angel in the house is this idea of like a domestic goddess, essentially a wife and a mother who just does everything for her house and her household. And in Mrs. Ramsay's case, she does everything for everybody. She is basically the mother of her community. And so Virginia Woolf takes that and really like goes through that entire role with a very, very fine-tooth comb and breaks it down and presents it to us in this setting. And I don't think necessarily it's entirely a criticism. I think it's more so just a look into that, because she also looks at the opposite of that through Mrs. Ramsay's daughters, and also Lily Briscoe, who is the painter. I think I've already mentioned this, Lily Briscoe, who kind of rejects that in a sense. She doesn't necessarily reject it, but she has a very unique perspective on it. I think she utilises it more so, and she breaks it down and helps. I guess she helps other people understand it, like the philosophers and the intellects who don't have the ability to see so deeply into things as Lily Briscoe does, which is another conversation that Virginia Woolf has throughout this novel, and that is the conversation about the philosopher and the artist, and they kind of butt heads a lot throughout. That is portrayed through Lily Briscoe and Mr. Ramsay, Mr. Ramsay being the philosopher. There's a bit in here where at the end of the novel, when they come back to the house, Mr. Ramsay makes a point of saying to Lily Briscoe, you must find us changed. And I think that's an indicator of their kind of like battle that they go throughout the novel, where Mr. Ramsay kind of puts a halt on Lily Briscoe's creativity and her managing to find her vision, which she does at the end of the novel, but which she's trying to find at the beginning of the novel. And I think it's that kind of idea of like, both of them have such an in-depth perspective, such an insider perspective on human nature and the human mind and how it works, but one does so very explicitly and one does so very abstractly. And I think that is another thing that Virginia Woolf is kind of exploring through those two characters, and I think it's done really well. It's definitely a conversation that I am very interested in, and I will be including in my dissertation videos when I break my dissertation into little video essays. That is something I really want to explore, because I think it links very much to Carl Jung, which is what I wrote my dissertation on. All of that was to say that this novel tackles a lot about the 20th century and 20th century society, and how it is changing and how it is reacting to past traditions and how it wants to kind of be rid of them. Virginia Woolf presents it as it is, instead of taking a side on whether or not we should. I think she kind of just presents the inevitability of tradition changing, with the changing of centuries, and with each generation and each age. Again, there is so much to be said about that conversation in particular in relation to Mrs. Ramsay and her daughters, and her kids as a whole, and Mr. Ramsay as well with his kids. Like that's a very common theme with Virginia Woolf, the whole idea of like the past generation kind of overshadowing or having some kind of looming effect on the present and future generations. And in this novel, it is between Mr. and Mrs. Ramsay and their eight children. But yeah, overall, a fantastic read. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with this. I honestly am so glad I reread it, because I got so much more from it than I did the first time I read it. I would 100% recommend this if you're looking for a place to start with Virginia Woolf. Keep in mind that I have only read 3, because I do think this is the easiest one to get into. But in the event that you did not get along with this as well as I did, or as well as other people have going into Virginia Woolf for the first time, I would also deeply recommend Night and Day as a beginning place for Virginia Woolf, because that is a bit more, the plot of that is very similar to a plot of a Jane Austen book. It is very much like, it can be both plot driven and character driven, I feel like, that one, because the plot, if you're into Jane Austen, it's kind of about these 4 people falling in love with each other, and also coming into a new stage in their life, kind of like a coming of age kind of novel, and also a romance novel, a little bit less focused on the romance, but I think it's a little bit more plot driven than this one. So I would also recommend that one if you did not get along with this one. I think it's very clear. I obviously gave this 5 stars. I would give it more if the option had arisen, but it did not, so we'll settle with 5 stars. And that is all I have to say for this book. This was a bit of a rambly outro, but my intention is to have 2 videos again dedicated to To The Lighthouse. So one will be my dissertation video, which will be linking To The Lighthouse to Carl Jung, and then the other one I'll kind of do like an overall analytical video on To The Lighthouse, breaking down everything that I found in it during this read. So I didn't want to go too much into it and kind of waste those videos, because I feel like those will be better opportunities to really cover the whole scope. So that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you have gotten this far, and I will hopefully see you soon for another one that should hopefully not take nearly 2 months to film. So goodbye for now.